today we have Mik from VÆKST having a chat with us. Welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Would you please be so kind and introduce yourself first and then introduce VÆKST as a company?
Definitely. So my name is Mik. I'm the co-founder and CEO of VÆKST, and VÆKST is a B2B sales and marketing agency that we built over the past 5 years. We specialize in executing go-to-market strategies around sales and marketing, helping international companies into the Nordics. And we have offices in Denmark and Sweden, so Malmö and Copenhagen. Around 60 business developers working here, speaking the native languages in the Nordics. And I guess my role in that is to have the overall commercial responsibility. I both work on projects. I think we've had more than 150 B2B brands that we've helped over the years. I've been a part of a lot of those, and it's both working with our sales and customers, a bit of a wide responsibility.
Can you explain a little bit about your background also? How did you end up in sales?
Yes, so originally I took a degree from Copenhagen Business School and the University of Technology in Denmark. So you could say my academic background is a mix of business and technology. However, I realized very early on that you either need to be able to build a product or sell it, especially if you want to start a company. And the business school was mostly focused on how to manage companies, and I wasn't really at that point yet. So I applied for a sales job because I saw that as the best way into entrepreneurship and business in general. And so I worked with B2B sales and B2C sales ever since I was, I think, around 17. And that eventually, you can say, created VÆKST because the company that we were working in stopped their operations in Denmark, and then we started up instead and took a lot of the knowledge with us. So we have a wealth of experience from the prior company, and then, of course, a lot now from VÆKST, which is the new one.
Why did you enjoy sales? How did you feel when you started to call to strangers? And did you do it only in Denmark or also to other countries?
I started in Denmark and Finland, actually, working for a consultancy. And I think, as many others, I had the fear of calling in the beginning, the fear of cold calling. But I've done a lot of sports when I was younger, and that performance mindset is something that I think is interesting in sales and that captivated me. I'm also very curious, and when you get to speak to a lot of people and interview them, which is essentially what sales is, you're interviewing them to get information, that also came very natural to me. And then I'm very interested in psychology. And when it comes to business, I think especially sales and marketing, and especially sales again, because it's a one-to-one connection with prospects, is also very interesting. So I think that's the reasons why I figured out that I love sales and go-to-market strategies in general, because it mixes psychology and strategy in an interesting way. But in the beginning, it was definitely tough. And I had some very good managers and leaders around me to get me over that. And I think a lot of that psychology is something that we inherited and has tried to bring on to VÆKST.
So when we talk about VÆKST, it was started by you and few others. Can you talk about that?
Definitely. Yeah, so we were 4 people, 2 Danes and 2 Swedes, working for the old company and who decided to make VÆKST. And it was a very good mix, I would say, of Swedish and Danish culture and experience, and mixing the old with the new, in the sense that the 2 other co-founders, it was me and Niklas in Denmark, and then our 2 co-founders in Sweden were more experienced than us. So we had a very good dynamic, and I think we drew on the network and the wealth of experience across the Nordic countries, because there's a lot of cultural differences in order to start VÆKST.
And VÆKST means growth.
And VÆKST means growth. It's spelled in the Danish way, but it also applies to the Swedish Norwegian language.
Yeah. Who are the ones who are the ideal customers for VÆKST?
So the partners that we work with always have high contract values. The reason for that is that the higher the contract value, the more of a demand you have for sales and a personal relationship with the customer. We also do sales enablement and marketing, and then we go a bit down, and then it can be companies with low contract values, but that's been our sweet spot. And that usually translates to B2B, always, and professional service, technology companies, finance, etc. So anything that sells a service that is labor-based, human-driven, or technology, which usually has very long contract values, has a long contract at times, has usually been our sweet spot. We are going more and more into B2C and B2B products and have very good experience there because, again, it's really about if you get this one customer, are you looking for a long-term relationship? And if you do, sales is usually a very good channel to have in your toolbox.
Yeah.
And then our clients come from all over the world. So we work with companies in the Baltics, Asia, United States, Europe, obviously, and Nordics, which is the main market.
Yes. Are there any industries you prefer? Also, what about heavy industries? Which is a bit
Yeah.
to your car?
We love heavy industry. We love the complex products and services. Anything around that. Professional services, professional products, heavy industry, manufacturing. We have a lot of cases to rely on. And sales is always bespoke, right? No strategy is the same, but it builds on the same building blocks. And so we probably have experience in somewhat similar campaigns to the new clients that we work with. And that gives us an ability to work very fast in deciding on what the right strategy is or what the right segment is.
Would you explain the process from start to the end? A new customer starts with you, you decide you're going to partner up. So what happens then?
Yes. So when we start up a customer, the first thing that we do is, of course, we do a kickoff call and we plan out an onboarding month. That's what we call the enablement team. We start with a workshop where we define the segmentation, targeting, and positioning strategy, is what we call it. So we use an SCP framework for defining what's the right ICP, what's the right messaging, and then which tactics and channels do we need to use to find and connect those two. After that, that's like the basis of the strategy, right? Once you know which customers you want to reach out to, what you want to say, and how you're going to reach them, then you have the foundation. The second part is, of course, enabling and activating that. We find the lead list. So we start by finding the total available market. We find both companies, relevant stakeholders, decision makers that we need to contact. And then we build pitches. We set up the right tools. We rely on AI-based tools, automation tools, whatever can help us streamline how we get in contact with the prospects. We set up a CRM system to connect with all the tools and maintain the entire flow, and which we also use for reporting. And then we start the outreach really after the first month. And when I say outreach, it's like in the beginning of all sales campaigns, you need to build a pipeline. That's why we always recommend clients to do both sales and marketing, because marketing is more volume based. Most often you can get out wider faster compared to calling prospects directly. And that can help you create a lot of top of funnel leads that sales can then work on. But at the same time, some of the companies need more of a strategic, personalized approach, which is why you need sales. So we then combine sales and marketing to build a pipeline and test all of these value propositions, unique selling points that we've identified in the workshops. And over the course of 3 months, we try to deliver as many leads as possible and as many insights. And most often, like after those 3 months, we see this segment is better than this segment, and this segment responds better to this unique selling point rather than this one. And then you're starting to create that go-to-market engine that you can scale up, right? Then who's my customer? What do I need to say? And then you can focus or double down on that to really see the results. So that's typically how we would start up. If it's marketing, we also create the content. It might be that we need to support them in creating some sales material. We sometimes do audits and make a strategic plan for how they could optimize their own sales process. We all participate on meetings, give feedback back to them. So it's all really dependent on whether it's sales and marketing or a combination, but it always involves an enabling part and then an execution part, right? So we do both things. We both advise and strategize with the client and all just execute on the strategy that they come with.
If you can put the timeline in weeks and months into one sentence, what should people count with?
You usually do a light audit the first week, and in the end of that first week, you do the first workshop. Then there's some work, and in the second week of the first month, you finalize all the things from the first workshop and you plan out to-dos for the coming weeks. Then in the coming weeks, you build pitches, you do sales training, you find the lead list, you set up all the systems, and that's month 1. And then month 2 is when the outreach starts. You start generating data, insights, and pipeline, and you do that for 3 months. And then from month 3 or the second quarter, when that begins, you scale it up.
How long do your customers usually stay with you? Is it 6 months, 12 months, 18?
Yeah, good question. It's very dependent on the type of the campaign. So we have customers that's been with us for 5 years, like since we started. We have some customers that has been with us 2 years, and there's some that comes in and they want to do a 6-month sprint, targeting some kind of market, and then they want to pause and they come back. So it's all very dependent, but I would say, yeah, it probably averages maybe around 9 months, because again, some do long term and then maybe after 9 months they switch to a new market, or they hire someone internally and then we help them do that. So then it's a different service, but we continue working together. So it depends on the service and the scope of the campaign, I would say.
How much work do your customers have to put in? So when they work with agencies like yours?
I think first of all, the success to a good campaign is close collaboration, right? So we would always do weekly check-ins with the client. Now that doesn't have to be the entire team, but some have to participate for 30 minutes to an hour. We would also do like mini workshops every quarter. So the ongoing process could probably be summarized to around 4 or 5 hours a month, right? From their side. In the onboarding process, it's definitely more, but sometimes it's 6 hours if they're very mature, have a strategy in place, and we just need to execute on it. And other times it's way more. Maybe it's like 25 hours because they don't have it, and we need to ping pong and brainstorm around what's the right approach.
So how long do they have to count with when they get the first results coming in?
Yeah, it's extremely dependent based on their time to close. Like we would start performing from the second month. After the onboarding month, we start performing. We start delivering interactions, leads, etc. Let's say it's an outbound sales campaigns, right? And it's about getting meetings with customers. Then they're going to get booked in the first month, but maybe they're going to be executed in the second month, for instance. And then those needs to be, the client needs to do a discovery call, a follow-up meeting, they need to make business proposals, etc. So if it's heavy industry, if it's complex professional service sales, I usually say expect your first customers to have a signed deal after 9 months, because very few companies with big contract values have a time to close. We start performing fast. We start generating interactions, which they can see very quickly. If it's advertisements, they will see the touch points and how many is clicking on a sign up button or whatever. But from that point and to that becoming revenue is all about the time to close. In lucky cases, we see customers hitting the nail. It's like we called someone, they had the exact need right now. A contract is signed the next month. And then there's the return on investment, or the break-even period on the investment is like 2 months. But I would say on average, it's probably more like between 7 and 12 months maybe.
Do you see a difference between foreign and local businesses in establishing the trust and getting the results when it comes to time? Is it faster for locals than for foreigners?
Yeah, I think the reason why we do sales and marketing is because you need to build a brand with marketing and with sales, but that's primarily a marketing job for most companies. And then you need to capitalize on that through sales. In other words, if you call someone and they already know about your brand, the probability of conversion is much higher. Since local brands have a bigger brand and a bigger network, so they have more growth channels being used, it goes much faster. If you're a foreign company, international company entering Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, it's a long-term investment. You have to realize that. You have to spend the time building the pipeline. You have to be creative. Should I reach out to some partners, maybe some competitors who might enable me to get the first logos? You need to put a lot of different ripples in the water, essentially. So yes, it takes longer.
So the local prospects, do they prefer local brands over foreign brands? When it comes to services, for example?
Very dependent on industry. right? I think at the end of the day, there is a lot right now going on with the US, and if the further from home or the more American it is, maybe it provides an element of risk. But I think that most often what I see is that the companies look for high quality or the most value for money. And whether that is a Swedish company delivering it to Denmark, a Lithuanian company delivering to Sweden, or it's not that important. Obviously, it's easier to connect with people you can meet with, which I think is very important when entering the Nordics, that you have that physical meeting and relationship. Yes, of course, they prefer locals because it's easier for them to get access to it and the risk is ultimately lower. Tariffs won't apply or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, I think the better product wins.
Can just jump into the US situation for a second. Do you see a jump in export to the Scandinavian countries because of that from Asia or other European countries that are losing markets in the US?
I think it's a bit too early for me to both say and feel the consequences of what's going on yet. But on a very small micro scale for us, which I can't really extrapolate anything of, is that yes, we've got inbound leads from Canada, for instance, and from other places that we didn't usually do. One of our partners has also quoted that as a reason, like they were looking for other markets than the United States. So it might be, but there could be other things going the other direction. So when we started VÆKST, that was actually during COVID, and then so that was the first kind of crisis to navigate. Then the second one was Russia, Ukraine, where we also experienced stock markets falling and budgets getting locked, people getting fired, and of course that influences agencies like us and local businesses. And I would say in both of those times, we relied on the fact that there's statistics around that companies that invest in sales during recessions or hard times are more likely to outperform peers over time. And that's something that we also do personally and that we talk with our clients around, right? That it might be a very good idea to do it when there's a dip. So my point is really that I hope there's a positive effect, especially for Nordic companies and Baltic companies and whatnot that's closer to home. But obviously there's also going to be a very big negative one. So I don't know yet.
In a year's time, we know.
Yeah.
Why should any foreign companies choose Scandinavian or Nordic markets over any other?
I guess like the Nordic markets has somewhat of a good brand. It's a difficult market, so if you can succeed in the Nordics, it seems like that has leverage in other parts of the world. That's what I've heard. If you can show Nordic brands and that if you're established in the Nordics, it shows high quality and good business acumen because you've been able to succeed there. I think that's one. I think secondly, the willingness to buy might be slightly higher than other places compared to quite small countries. Compared to international ones, we have pretty high GDP per capita and businesses work very well. We have good profit margins. We have big companies, especially in Denmark, some of the biggest ones in Europe, even though we're quite small. So I think that it's an attractive market for many, it seems like it. And that not only it's attractive on a micro scale because they get better financials from it, they can sell their products more at a higher margin, etc., but also because they can leverage that branding wise to catapult them into new markets.
So you can see that the buying power is balancing out the size of the market.
There's an element of, even though there's not that many, I guess, companies, consumers compared to the United States, they're more willing to buy. And we export heavy.
Which Scandinavian country should be their first choice? There is always that question.
That is a good question. And I think the answer ultimately depends on, again, who's your ICP and what are you selling? Because Denmark might be very big on life sciences. That might be a good first approach. Sweden might be very good on manufacturing or industry in general, a bigger market. So it all depends. But I think that foreign companies, in my experience, will have an easier time with Finland and Sweden to begin with due to the culture being more open and due to they're very good at building businesses as well. in Denmark and Norway, what I've seen is it's more difficult to get meetings, I would say, than Sweden and Finland. And if you just look at it mathematically, you need a big funnel. And in the beginning, if you're new, you need a lot of meetings, right? Because you need to create network, you need to figure out what's going on, you need to understand the cultural differences. So I would probably, on a general advice, if I didn't know anything about the industry that they're targeting or whatnot, I would say it's easier with Sweden and Finland to get meetings. But again, it's very easy to, and I guess going back to your first question, it's also very easy to do business in the Nordics. I think we rank very high on how easy it is to create a company, and the data is public and all of these elements. It's not chaotic and messy, maybe in the same way that Southern Europe could be in terms of finding company data, etc. The data integrity is higher. And I think that's very true of Denmark and Norway, especially. So I think all four merits a consideration. And ultimately, I would decide based on my ICP.
Do you see businesses from Asia prefer some Nordic countries over others?
I think like generally, I would just say Sweden. Sweden is they are heavy on industry. And whenever we work with foreign companies, they usually say we have some logos in Sweden, but now we need some in Denmark and Norway, for instance. So in my experience, it's probably Sweden.
So when companies get your help, so they don't have to reach out, they don't have to do many things they would otherwise have to do in-house. But how much do they have to or should learn about the local business culture?
So I usually say that in the outreach part, right, in the initial part of sales, appointment scheduling, lead generation, you probably need native speakers to max out on your potential. Once it gets to sales meetings and closing the deals, it's fine in English, right? But conversion rates are always higher when you're physical than virtual. Obviously, they need to invest a lot, but like we have some customers where we take the entire sales process. You know, we both deliver meetings and we execute them. We both do the marketing and we do the follow-up, we do the contract negotiations, etc. There you can be a bit hands-off, right? Because we represent their company. But if you are executing it yourself, you do have to invest a lot of time and effort in it.
And should know also how to behave or how to greet in Denmark or this cultural bits and pieces in trust building.
Yeah, definitely. You need to understand the cultural nuances. And again, Copenhagen has been a trade hub for a long time. We're very good at English and we're very, I would say, accommodating, very straightforward, following. We're not that irrational, I would say. I think you have a good probability of connecting with people in the Nordics when it comes to business. And I think we're straight shooters in terms of business deals, etc. So I think you'll pick it up quite fast. You don't have to be in a lot of meetings. And a lot of people here are obviously international. People sitting in high places in the international companies that are now international, of course, also very good at English and have done business abroad. We travel a lot and a lot of people are coming and living in the Nordics. So you need to understand it and you can understand it. I think that's my main takeaway there.
So how easy are Scandinavians and especially also Danes to read for foreigners? From the behavior, from the face, there are cultures that only talk through the red wine, but then there are other cultures that are very straight out with their thoughts, like the Netherlands, for example.
Yeah, it's a good point. Again, I think in sales and marketing, we live off stereotypes, right? And
right?
we make avatars and ICPs, and then we assume everyone is like that. And the reality is far from it, right? You can't just say all Danes are like this and whatnot. But I will say that I think Danes hate being sold to and they love a good deal. That's usually what we say. They're difficult to book a meeting with, for instance. More difficult, I would say, than Swedes and Finns, maybe. But if you get the meeting, it's also usually because there's an interest, which goes back to why I said it was probably easier getting in contact with Swedes and Finns. I think we're less polite and less consensus seeking than the Swedes are, in my experience. I think the Swedes are very decent, good businessmen, and they talk through strategy and plans a lot, involve multiple stakeholders. We do that in Denmark as well. But on average, I think what we see just from the data is the time to close will be longer in Sweden because more people are involved. than it would be in Denmark, for instance. So that could be one thing. But there are a lot of nuances. I think companies that we work with in Denmark usually go for Malmö, southern Sweden, because that's actually quite close business culture wise, whereas it's a bit more difficult for Danes to sell to companies in Stockholm. It's both further away. It's also a very different culture. And like historically, there might be some things there where they don't always trust the Danes or whatever. So there are a couple of nuances, but it's not too much. I think you just have to be polite and you have to obviously showcase value and build likability and credibility like in any other country or sales process.
But how should people or businesses overcome the difficulty that appears when they're trying to get in touch with Danes or getting them into meetings? What should they do differently?
I think everything in sales and marketing comes down to likability and credibility, really. If you're able to make someone like and trust you, you have a much higher probability of being able to sell or build a relationship with them. There's obviously a lot of techniques you can use for that, but at the fundamental, you need to have specific messages for them. People want to matter. So if you send automated outreach, automated emails, for instance, which is illegal in Denmark, for instance. So that's, I guess, another nuance between the countries. I think it's different in Sweden. But if you do that, you're not going to have any response rates and you're probably going to get reported and your domain rating is probably going to go down because it's not personalized. So in the introduction of whatever you do, I would always make it about the prospect and give them a very good reason for why you're reaching out. So it seems like this is the only call or mail you're sending today. And when it comes to credibility, I think relying on cases, obviously, the greatest way to sell anything is through a story. And stories, professional stories, usually evolve around what you've done before, context, action, result. Why did it start? What did you do? What was the outcome? And hopefully it's something that they can relate to. And if you then build a pitch or a narrative around why you're reaching out and why is your company interesting for them specifically, you ask the right power questions to open up the conversation, figure out what their need is, and you're able to match that with a good case and also body language, if it's in person, or tonation, articulation, verbal expressions, if you're on the phone. I think all of that is very important to build that likability and credibility. And then in my experience, what we focus most on internally, and whenever we advise our clients, we booked a lot of meetings or generate a lot of leads, but they're not closing it. I usually see that it's because A, they don't follow up, and B, they don't provide a next step, which is the same thing, right? So a lot of people think it's unnatural for them to provide a next step, to commit to something. So when should we talk next? Should I come by next week for a cup of coffee and let's follow up on the business proposal? And then they go out of the room and they have 20 other things to do and they forget to follow up. I would say those two things are completely crucial for building and maintaining a pipeline. So that's probably what I would focus on.
What are the other big mistakes you can see that foreign companies are doing when trying to enter the Scandinavian markets?
I think it's going back to what we talked about culture. I think if you adopt a very American or British sales philosophy, I think you're going to have a hard time. That is more based on elevator pitches, dominance, which of course can be assertiveness, can be good. But I think you should understand the native culture and how we would do sales here. Because what I've realized is that it's incredibly difficult. We didn't have that much success trying to pitch to the UK in a prior project. So I think understanding that is important. And then catering, of course, the sales philosophy to that. Second of all, I think not going here physically is a massive mistake. Obviously, it's expensive, so maybe you should pool meetings on one day and actually meet them. But a very good reason for calling out could be, hey, we want to enter the Nordics and we're going to swing by your office 2 months from now. Are you interested in a cup of coffee around cybersecurity or whatever it might be? I think that's the second mistake. And then the third mistake is probably having a short-term view. So thinking that you can just press a button, scale a bunch of outreach, and then meetings will just come and you'll just close them. That's also a mentality I see, not a lot, but it's there. I would say entering a new market is a long-term investment. It's multiple years, not multiple months. And if you have that mindset, then you can test a lot of things out, figure out what works, go for it. That's something you need to do. And of course, that requires a liquidity reserve to be able to fund it. So going in too early is probably also doomed.
What I know, like long time ago, I came to Denmark 27 years ago, more than that. And there were two things. One is that Danes don't really tolerate apathetic, too quiet people who are not having a spark in their eye, don't show interest, who are just listening, maybe following with, and that was never well received. So I guess it's also one of the things to maybe look at. And the other thing is that I have always seen Danes, almost like high-speed trains, very into innovative ideas, always developing, always making things better, trying to find more effective solutions. I haven't seen that much so. That's how we have always done it, and that's how we will continue mindset. Do you agree with me?
I think it's a super interesting observation, and I definitely agree that I've seen the same elements in a lot of people. On the first thing you said, I think it really comes down. I've worked with a lot of introverts and extroverts, even in sales, right? And if it's not to say anything bad about CTOs, but if you prospect towards very technical people that are maybe more likely to be introvert, not all of them, but some of them may spend their entire day coding or whatever it might be instead of maybe like you and me talking to people or pitching. I think it can be fine to be quiet. Again, it's about matching them, right? If they're quiet, it's fine to match it. If they're speaking slowly, I would do that. But if you talk to a sales executive, I obviously talk a lot. Then again, it could be an idea to match that. So I really think it depends. But I think there's a lot of innovation. Like we work with incubators a lot and schools around how to bring sales to startups and get the first customers. And I'm always impressed how much the next generation is more innovative and have an even bigger spark in their eyes. So definitely. I think it also applies to some of the other countries. But yeah.
Yeah. But in some other countries, the traditional way of doing things is, it seems, the safest. So it can actually become a problem when these two cultures are crashing.
Yeah.
And the same actually with the energy level. I come from a culture where at school at that time, we had to be quiet. You just have to listen. And so when I studied in Denmark, then I got points taken off because I was too quiet. I didn't ask questions.
It's a good point. I actually thought about that as well just now, that of course the school system has a lot to do with it. I went to schools where it was very focused on presentation and not having rigid structures and essentially letting the students express themselves and figure out a lot of things for themselves. Very little structure in some sense. And you're right, that has probably driven it a lot. So yeah, I think it's a good point.
What should foreign businesses do, or sales managers, export managers, business owners, when they find that, okay, it's time to expand? What's the first thing they need to do? Let's say they have somehow figured out that Denmark or Sweden or Norway is the best fit. What should they do next? How should they search after help?
Yeah, good point. Again, like you're saying, once you've done the analysis and have the capital, right, and you want to look at execution, in my opinion, of course I'm biased, but I think you should talk to a local agency or consultancy or an embassy, whatever, any kind of local support system, because we obviously know more than they would. And then whether they decide to execute it in a collaboration with another party or themselves is of course up to them, but seek out local experts to make sure that the things that you thought was actually right, the analysis is correct. It's very easy to do an analysis based on secondary information today due to the wealth of information online, but a lot of it is also not entirely true, obviously. So I think primary research is increasing in value, speaking to prospects, speaking to experts. And the second thing is, in the Nordics, we're very digital, which means that if you go on Google and you search on a sales agency, or you go on ChatGPT even, it might help you point you in the right direction. I have a lot of international clients coming to us, and if they say that they're looking for someone to build a brand new website, I'm like, talk to these guys. So I think we're also, because we know each other, we work together, and we're very focused on our brand and delivering quality. It's if someone is not right for the job, they're probably also gonna tell you and refer you to someone. Relying on the internet to find out the right ones, searching on Google, ChatGPT, Bing, or whatever you might use, probably works well. And then once you're talking to agencies, don't be hesitant to ask them, so should I talk to someone else besides you? If I get that question, I would say yes. These are our 3 peers, and I only have good things to say about them, so talk to them as well. Maybe they're a better fit. That's how it is.
Yeah, definitely. So one good thing about Scandinavia, I would say Denmark is a bit better than, for example, Norway, directing people to those who actually can help them better. But still, in Scandinavia, it's a very good thing. It's not like that in every country. What I would like to say is that, let's say in Denmark, I would say over 80% of the websites of local service providers are in local language only. Yours is in English. Most sales agencies have it in English as well, but most others, let's say bookkeepers or business strategy or whatever, they are in Danish only. So it can be a little bit difficult. Also, why people should look for local experts. Let's say if they need, let's say, storage, pick and send, for example, for example, you can never find those services from another country if you don't know the language and you don't know the terms. So you need locals to help you out with these kind of solutions.
Definitely. When we went into Sweden, we relied on locals from Malmö, right? Because we went into Malmö. So, I mean, it's a need to have to do it. I agree. I think that you're probably right with the websites as well. I didn't know that a lot of them are in local languages. Like, I just use Google Translate to figure out what they say. I looked at a Polish site the other day and it just pops up and say translate to English, fine. Maybe it's not completely accurate, but then I know the gist of it. So I think we also, I mean, so yeah, you need the local understanding, you need the local expert, but especially around the capitals, English sufficiency or proficiency, sorry, is very high.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So once you get in touch with the right people, then it's no problem speaking in English with them. But yeah, because I search for experts all the time, so I know it can be really difficult for foreigners.
Yeah.
A final question about the budget. I know it's very subjective, but still, what's the budget just about one mid-sized business should count with when they want to, let's say, enter the Danish market?
That's actually a very good question because I talk a lot with my customers around it, right? I always, all our partners, I ask them, what's your customer lifetime value? And then most of them actually says, I don't know. It's difficult to calculate. It is, but there's a bunch of rule of thumbs you can use or export your revenue data and divide it by the months or, whatever, or divide it by the amount of customers. You can figure out approximately how much have you made per customer in your lifetime, right? And that gives you some kind of idea of your customer lifetime value, both on revenue and most importantly on the gross profit. And then you have the customer acquisition cost, right? How much you pay for a customer. And the ratio between those two, that's the growth multiple. That's what I call it, at least, I think, and I hope other people call it. But the growth multiple is obviously how many times over can you pay back your customer acquisition cost with your customer lifetime value. And that equation has to be obviously positive. For consultancies, it might be 3 to 5. For technology companies, it might be much higher, same with products, because there's different margins, right? But so my point is a bit like how much you need to invest always depends on your customer lifetime value. If you think you'll make €1 million per customer, don't be shy of investing 300,000 euros in getting that 1 million. For professional service companies, because most work with 30% for profits, 30% for salaries, 30% for overhead, whatever. Everything is different and based on industries, but that's what I would do. But like I said before, if it takes 9 months to get a customer, you need at least 9 months worth of liquidity to fund that if one customer can pay that back. At the same time, you need to see it as an investment. Our prices could range between 1,000 euros to 5,000 euros for one country. And it all really depends on the structure, right? Do you need someone in person calling out, then it's of course more expensive than just doing LinkedIn outreach, because you can automate some of that. So there's a lot of nuances, but a good way is of course saying, what's the alternative cost? If you would need to hire someone, set up shop, find a local expert, recruit, onboard, train, maintain, office capacity, sickness, risk of resignation, all of that adds up. And in my experience, it's a much more cost-effective solution to have a partner if it's a new country, especially, because all of that comes into some kind of salary multiplier and some kind of risk, right?
Yeah.
But it's a good way of establishing that. You can figure out how much does it cost to set up shop, how many months you need to recruit, what's the salary of an account executive or an SDR, and you can use that as a benchmark. And then you can make a best and a worst case scenario, and you can go out to people like us and ask for the business case and see what adds up. So that's probably the easiest exercise. And otherwise, most agencies would probably charge around, I don't know, 3,000 to 5,000 euros for half full timer, something like that. And then you do that over 12 months, and then you have your budget.
Yeah. And it's difficult to find a person who has language skills, sales skills, and then local know-how.
It's difficult to find good salespeople. It's difficult to find experts, and it takes time. And obviously, again, since the Nordics are an attractive market, a lot of other people are competing for the same resources. And a lot of them has local companies with cultures and colleagues that is, of course, gives them a big perk compared to sitting alone, maybe for a year, being the only one in Denmark for an international company. So again, but it all depends on the go-to-market strategy.
Many questions, many answers, lots of good stuff.
Happy to.
Would you like to wrap up with some good comments?
Yeah, I think foremost, when it comes down to the step-by-step approaches that we talked about, I think you need to look for native speakers, understand the market, and cater the sales philosophy based on that. I think you need to take the long-term view, work with partners, at least in the introduction phase, to help strategize it, and generally just evaluate the alternatives. And once you do the analysis, you will realize, am I going for life science companies or am I going for manufacturing? Do I have brands that are closest to the Swedish or the Danish companies? And then you can get an idea of which market to start in and go from there, right? So I think that would be it. And maybe the final thought is that I have seen too many companies invest only in marketing or invest only in sales instead of doing both. And it is a proven fact that aligning sales and marketing provides a higher return on investment done right, because you both need to, like we talked about, build brand and capitalize on the brand. And those two functions should work together. So whenever you do the budgeting or you look for a partner, consider both.
I think your marketing approach, and I know you're very passionate about it, I think it's like a topic on its own. I would like to know more about it, honestly. So it is something that anyone who wants to know more about has to get in touch with you and ask more information, and you will definitely explain.
Definitely. And there's a lot of different schools and philosophies within marketing, and mine is very specific and ultimately probably differs from others. But we're a sales first company, and that also translates to our approach to marketing. And that biases us, but I think it's the right way to go around it. But I would be happy to talk about that. And again, marketing, like sales, depends on the company and the strategy, which channels to use, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. All right. But thank you for your time today and all the good insights.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.